A desperate roar pierced the silence of the Kenyan wilderness. But this wasn't the mighty call of the king of the jungle. It was the terrified cry of a lion cub trapped in nature's most deceptive trap. In a remote waterhole surrounded by fever trees, young Kesi found himself sinking deeper into the treacherous quicksand. With each panicked movement, his golden fur now darkened with the thick, muddy mixture that threatened to claim his life. What happened when the rescue team arrived would challenge everything they thought they knew about the bonds between humans and wild animals. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Maasai Mara, painting the acacia-dotted landscape in shades of amber and gold. The air hung heavy with the scent of wild sage and the distant promise of rain, while dung beetles rolled their treasures across the red earth, and weaver birds chattered in the thorny branches above. This was the domain of lions, where pride ruled over territory and survival meant understanding the ancient rhythms of predator and prey. Kesi's amber eyes, wide with terror, reflected the morning light as he struggled against the deceptive grip of what had appeared to be solid ground just moments before. His small paws, designed to grip rocky outcroppings and soft grass, found no purchase in the liquid earth that seemed to have a will of its own. Each movement sent ripples through the sandy mixture, and each ripple pulled him deeper into its suffocating embrace. The waterhole had been a beacon of hope in the drought-stricken landscape, its surface shimmering like a mirage made real. Hidden beneath a thin crust of dried earth lay the quicksand that had claimed unwary animals for generations, a natural trap as old as the geological forces that shaped this ancient land. The recent rains had made it particularly treacherous, softening the surface just enough to appear safe while concealing the liquid death beneath. Around the waterhole, the signs of previous victims told their silent stories. Scattered bones bleached white by the relentless African sun, half-buried remnants of zebras and antelopes who had approached this place, seeking life-giving water only to find something far different. The fever trees stood as silent sentinels, their yellow bark and delicate leaves bearing witness to countless dramas of survival and loss that played out in the shadow of their ancient trunks. Kesi was not just any lion cub. He was the youngest of Amara's pride, born during the season when the rains had failed and the great herds had migrated early to distant pastures. His name meant "born in times of trouble" in the local Maasai language, a prophetic choice that seemed to follow him like his own shadow across the savannah. Unlike his older siblings who had learned caution through harsh experience, Kesi possessed an insatiable curiosity that often led him beyond the boundaries his mother had carefully established. His golden coat bore the distinctive rosette patterns that marked him as future royalty of the plains, though those markings were now barely visible beneath the coating of mud and sand. Kesi's mother, Amara, was known throughout the territory as both a fierce protector and a patient teacher, her reputation built on countless successful hunts and her ability to guide her cubs through the dangers of their harsh world. She had survived droughts, territorial wars, and the ever-present threat of human encroachment, earning her place as the pride's undisputed matriarch. The bond between Amara and Kesi ran deeper than mere maternal instinct. While her other cubs had quickly learned to heed her warnings and stay close during dangerous times, Kesi's adventurous spirit reminded her of herself at that age. Fearless, curious, and dangerously naive about the world's hidden perils. She had spent countless hours teaching him to read the subtle signs of the wilderness, the way certain birds fell silent before predators approached, how the wind carried scents that told stories of distant dangers, and which water sources could be trusted during the dry season. The pride's territory encompassed nearly 30 square miles of diverse landscape, from rocky kopjes where leopards made their homes, to the vast grasslands where buffalo herds grazed in the early morning hours. Kesi had explored much of this domain under his mother's watchful eye, learning the locations of reliable water sources, safe denning sites, and the invisible boundaries that separated their land from that of rival prides. Yet this particular waterhole lay at the very edge of their territory, in a region Amara had specifically warned her cubs to avoid. The young cub's adventurous nature had been both blessing and curse throughout his short life. His willingness to explore had led to the discovery of a hidden cache of old bones perfect for strengthening growing teeth, but it had also resulted in a terrifying encounter with a honey badger that left him with respect for creatures that punched far above their weight. The morning had begun like countless others in the Maasai Mara, with the pride stirring to life as the first golden rays crested the horizon. Amara had led her cubs to a rocky outcropping where they could survey their territory while the air still held the coolness of night. The adult lions stretched and yawned, their powerful forms silhouetted against the brightening sky, while the cubs tumbled over each other in playful wrestling matches that would one day become deadly serious battles for survival. Kesi had watched with growing restlessness as his siblings seemed content to doze in the warming sun, their bellies full from the previous night's successful hunt. A migrating wildebeest had provided more than enough meat for the entire pride, and the satisfaction of a good meal had made everyone drowsy and content. But contentment had never sat well with Kesi's adventurous spirit, and as the morning heat began to build, an irresistible urge to explore tugged at his consciousness like a physical force. The decisive moment came when a flock of red-billed quailias burst from the tall grass in the distance, their synchronized flight creating a shifting cloud of crimson against the blue sky. Something had disturbed them, and Kesi's predatory instincts, still developing but already strong, demanded investigation. While Amara's attention was focused on grooming one of his sisters, and the other adult lions had settled into their midday rest, Kesi made his choice. He slipped away from the pride with the stealth that comes naturally to all cats, his small paws making no sound on the sun-warmed rock. The tall grass swallowed him immediately, its golden stalks closing behind him like a curtain, muffling the distant sounds of his family's peaceful afternoon. For the first time in his young life, Kesi was truly alone in the wilderness, and the sensation was both thrilling and terrifying. The journey toward the bird disturbance led him through terrain he had never seen before, past termite mounds that towered like ancient monuments, and through groves of whistling thorn acacias whose sharp spines caught at his fur. Each step took him further from safety, from the familiar scents and sounds that had defined his world since birth. The sun climbed higher, and with it came the first whispers of doubt. But curiosity proved stronger than caution, driving the young cub deeper into unknown territory where danger lurked in forms he had never been taught to recognize. The African sun climbed relentlessly higher, transforming the landscape into a shimmering furnace of heat and light. What had begun as an exciting adventure now felt like a journey into an alien world, where familiar landmarks disappeared behind walls of elephant grass and thorny scrubland. Kesi's small paws, already tender from walking on unfamiliar rocky ground, began to ache with each step, while his tongue grew thick with thirst that seemed to intensify with every breath of the scorching air. The scent of water had reached him nearly an hour ago, a tantalizing promise carried on the hot wind that spoke of relief and salvation. But the waterhole remained frustratingly elusive, always seeming just beyond the next rise or hidden behind the next grove of fever trees. The young cub's energy, once boundless and enthusiastic, began to flag as dehydration took its toll on his small body. His golden coat, usually lustrous and thick, now hung limp and dusty, while his bright amber eyes began to lose their spark of adventure. Strange sounds echoed across the landscape, the haunting call of ground hornbills in the distance, the rustle of unseen creatures moving through the dry grass, and most unsettling of all, the complete absence of the familiar voices of his pride. For the first time since leaving the safety of the rocky outcropping, Kesi attempted to call out, producing a weak mewling sound that seemed to be swallowed immediately by the vast emptiness around him. The silence that followed was more terrifying than any roar could have been. As he crested a small hill covered in scattered baobab trees, the waterhole finally revealed itself in the valley below. It appeared like an oasis in the harsh landscape, surrounded by the distinctive yellow-barked fever trees and bordered by what looked like firm, safe ground. The surface of the water sparkled invitingly in the afternoon sun, promising relief from the burning thirst that had become his constant companion. Kesi's heart leaped with joy and relief, and his tired legs found new strength as he began his descent toward salvation. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work, so if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. But the landscape held secrets that his young eyes could not read. The seemingly solid ground around the waterhole bore subtle signs of danger that only experience could interpret. The unusual color of the earth, the way certain areas reflected light differently, and most telling of all, the complete absence of the animal tracks that should have marked any genuine watering place in this drought-stricken region. The descent toward the waterhole filled Kesi with desperate hope, his parched throat driving him forward with single-minded determination. His small paws found purchase on the rocky slope as he navigated between scattered boulders and thorny shrubs, each step bringing him closer to the promise of cool, life-giving water. The fever trees cast dappled shadows across the ground, their distinctive bark glowing like golden beacons in the harsh afternoon light, while the waterhole itself seemed to beckon with its mirror-like surface. Without the wisdom that comes from experience, Kesi saw only salvation where older, more cautious animals would have detected warning signs. The ground around the water's edge appeared firm and inviting, covered with what looked like a natural crust of dried earth that would provide safe footing for drinking. His instincts, still developing and untested by real danger, failed to register the subtle differences in coloration and texture that marked this place as a death trap rather than a sanctuary. The moment his front paws touched the deceptive surface, Kesi knew something was terribly wrong. What had appeared solid gave way instantly, and instead of finding firm ground, his paws sank into a mixture that had the consistency of thick porridge. Panic flared in his chest as he tried to pull back, but the movement only caused him to sink deeper, the quicksand responding to his struggles by tightening its grip around his small legs. Every survival instinct his mother had tried to teach him screamed in contradiction to what his body wanted to do. Logic demanded stillness, but terror demanded escape, and terror won. Kesi thrashed wildly, his powerful hind legs kicking frantically as he tried to propel himself backward onto solid ground. Each movement sent ripples through the treacherous mixture, and each ripple seemed to pull him deeper into its suffocating embrace. The quicksand rose past his chest, restricting his breathing and making each heartbeat feel like it might be his last. His roars, which should have carried for miles across the open savanna, emerged as weak, muffled cries that barely disturbed the afternoon stillness. The water he had sought so desperately remained tantalizingly close, its surface unmarked by his struggles, while the solid ground behind him might as well have been on another continent. For the first time in his young life, Kesi confronted the reality that nature could be not just harsh, but actively malevolent, setting traps for the unwary that offered no mercy and no second chances. Hours passed with agonizing slowness as Kesi's strength ebbed away like water disappearing into desert sand. The quicksand had risen to his neck, and each labored breath became a conscious effort that required all his remaining energy. His once bright amber eyes had dulled with exhaustion and dehydration, while his golden coat was now completely saturated with the thick, clay-like mixture that seemed determined to claim him entirely. The African sun beat down mercilessly, adding the torture of heat exhaustion to his already desperate situation. The young cub had long since stopped his frantic struggles, having learned through bitter experience that movement only accelerated his descent into the earth's hungry embrace. His small head remained above the surface by mere inches, tilted back at an unnatural angle to keep his nose and mouth free of the suffocating mixture. Every few minutes a weak whimper escaped his throat, more reflex than conscious call for help, as if his body refused to completely surrender even when his mind had begun to accept the inevitable. Vultures had begun to circle overhead, their keen eyes having spotted the drama unfolding below. These scavengers of the savannah possessed an almost supernatural ability to sense approaching death, and their presence added a grim punctuation to Kesi's predicament. The shadow of their wings passed over him repeatedly, each dark silhouette a reminder that his story was about to join the countless others that had ended in this same treacherous place. The fever trees stood as silent witnesses to his struggle, their yellow bark seeming to glow with inner fire in the late afternoon light. Scattered among their roots lay the bleached bones of previous victims, a macabre testament to the quicksand's long history of claiming the unwary. A zebra's skull, partially buried and worn smooth by countless seasons, stared with empty sockets toward the trapped cub, while the curved rib bones of what might once have been an antelope protruded from the earth like the fingers of skeletons reaching toward the sky. Kesi's vision began to blur as dehydration and exhaustion took their final toll. The sounds of the wilderness, the distant call of a fish-eagle, the rustle of wind through dry grass, the buzz of flies attracted by his predicament, seemed to fade into a dreamlike haze. His mother's face appeared in his failing consciousness, her gentle amber eyes filled with the love and protection he would never feel again, her warm tongue that would never again groom his fur or comfort his fears. The distant rumble of vehicles cutting through the wilderness silence seemed like a hallucination at first, just another trick of Kesi's failing consciousness. But the sound grew steadily stronger, accompanied by human voices speaking in urgent tones that carried across the still air. A Kenya Wildlife Service patrol had been conducting routine anti-poaching surveillance in the area when their guide, a Maasai tracker named Samuel, noticed the circling vultures and insisted they investigate. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the team's veterinarian, was the first to spot the small golden head barely visible above the quicksand surface. Her sharp intake of breath brought the entire rescue team running, their equipment clanking as they rushed toward the waterhole. What they discovered defied their expectations. Not the adult animal they had anticipated based on the vulture's behavior, but a lion cub so young he should still have been under his mother's constant protection. The rescue presented challenges none of them had faced before. Traditional quicksand extraction methods designed for humans would be useless on an animal Kesi's size, and any wrong move could push him completely under the surface. Samuel studied the situation with the practiced eye of someone who had spent his entire life reading the subtle signs of the African wilderness, calculating angles and pressure points, while Dr. Rodriguez prepared emergency medical supplies. Park Ranger Michael Ocheng worked frantically to assemble a makeshift pulley system using climbing rope and a portable winch from their vehicle, anchoring it to the strongest fever tree within reach. The urgency in their movements reflected their understanding that they had arrived at the very last possible moment. Kesi's breathing was so shallow it was barely perceptible, and his eyes had closed as consciousness slipped away. But what happened next would challenge every assumption they held about wild animals and human intervention. As Dr. Rodriguez carefully positioned a modified rescue harness around Kesi's chest, the semi-conscious cub did something that froze every member of the team in place. Instead of the expected fear response or aggressive struggle that wild animals typically display when handled by humans, Kesi's eyes fluttered open and locked onto Dr. Rodriguez's face, with an expression of unmistakable trust and gratitude. The cub's weak purr, barely audible above the mechanical sounds of the rescue equipment, seemed to acknowledge that these strange creatures were not threats but saviors, and his small paw briefly touched the veterinarian's gloved hand in what could only be described as a gesture of connection across the species divide. The extraction required painstaking precision, with every movement calculated to avoid pushing Kesi deeper into the quicksand's treacherous grip. Dr. Rodriguez spoke in soft, soothing tones as she worked, her voice seeming to calm the exhausted cub even as the rescue harness was carefully positioned around his small frame. The pulley system creaked under tension as Michael operated the winch with surgical precision, applying just enough force to counteract the quicksand's suction without causing injury to Kesi's fragile body. Inch by agonizing inch, the young lion emerged from his liquid prison, the quicksand releasing its hold with reluctant, sucking sounds that seemed to protest losing its victim. Samuel guided the extraction with hand signals, his experienced eyes monitoring every shift in the sand's consistency and the cub's physical condition. When Kesi's hind paws finally broke free from the surface, a collective exhale of relief escaped from the entire rescue team. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work, so if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. But their work was far from over. Kesi lay motionless on the solid ground, his breathing shallow and his body temperature dangerously low despite the afternoon heat. Dr. Rodriguez immediately began emergency treatment, carefully cleaning the thick mixture from his airways while monitoring his vital signs. The cub's dehydration was severe, and hypothermia had set in from prolonged contact with the cool underground moisture that fed the quicksand trap. As warm saline solution flowed through an IV line into Kesi's tiny foreleg, something extraordinary began to unfold. The cub's amber eyes, which had been clouded with exhaustion and trauma, gradually regained their clarity and focus. But instead of the wild panic that veterinarians typically encounter when treating feral animals, Kesi remained remarkably calm, as if he understood that these humans had saved his life and posed no threat. Dr. Rodriguez found herself making soft clicking sounds, a communication technique she had learned worked with domestic cats, and was amazed when Kesi responded with weak but unmistakable purring. The young lion seemed to recognize the sounds of care and compassion that transcended species barriers, responding to kindness with a trust that defied everything the rescue team thought they knew about human-wildlife interactions. Samuel observed this unprecedented display with quiet wonder, his weathered face breaking into a smile as he witnessed something that would become legend among the Maasai people. In their traditional stories, such moments were signs of great significance, when the boundaries between human and animal dissolved to reveal the deeper connections that bind all living things together in the great web of existence. The search for Kesi's pride became an urgent mission that required all of Samuel's tracking expertise and generations of inherited knowledge about lion behavior. Using GPS coordinates and detailed topographical maps, the team began systematically exploring the territory within a 10-mile radius of the waterhole, looking for the subtle signs that would indicate a pride's recent presence. Samuel examined bent grass stems, analyzed scent markings on termite mounds, and studied the patterns of disturbed earth that told the story of where the lions had traveled. The breakthrough came when they discovered fresh paw prints near a seasonal stream 3 miles to the north, the distinctive size and spacing indicating an adult female with cubs. Samuel's trained eye could read the story written in the earth, how long ago the tracks were made, the direction of travel, and most importantly, the signs of distress in the irregular spacing that suggested a mother searching frantically for something precious she had lost. Following the trail led them through a landscape of stunning beauty and hidden dangers, past granite copias where rock hyraxes sunned themselves on warm stone and through valleys where ancient baobab trees stood like sentinels from another age. The afternoon sun painted everything in shades of gold and amber, while the distant calls of various wildlife species created a symphony that had remained unchanged for millennia. When they finally spotted Amara, she was standing on a high, rocky outcrop, her magnificent form silhouetted against the sky as she released a series of roars that echoed across the wilderness. The sound was unlike anything Dr. Rodriguez had ever heard. Not the territorial roar of a hunting lion, but something far more primal and heartbreaking. The desperate call of a mother who had lost her child and refused to give up hope. The reunion that followed would remain etched in every team member's memory for the rest of their lives. As they approached with Kesi, now stable but still weak from his ordeal, Amara's roars changed from desperate calls to sounds of recognition and overwhelming relief. The moment she saw her cub, her entire posture transformed from anguish to joy, and she bounded down from the rocks with a grace and speed that showcased the raw power and beauty of Africa's apex predator. Kesi, despite his weakness, managed to lift his head and produce a soft mewing sound that carried across the distance between them, a sound that seemed to heal something broken in the very fabric of the wilderness itself. The moment Amara reached her rescued cub created a scene that defied the harsh realities of wildlife survival. Instead of immediately whisking Kesi away from the humans, she approached Dr. Rodriguez with deliberate steps, her massive head lowering until she was eye level with the veterinarian who had saved her child's life. For several heartbeats that seemed to stretch into eternity, predator and human regarded each other with mutual respect and understanding. What happened next left the entire rescue team speechless. Amara gently touched her nose to Dr. Rodriguez's outstretched hand, a gesture so tender and purposeful that it could only be interpreted as gratitude. The lioness then carefully picked up Kesi by the scruff of his neck, but instead of departing immediately, she paused and looked back at each member of the rescue team, her amber eyes seeming to memorize their faces. Samuel later told his village elders that he witnessed something that day that proved the ancient Maasai belief that all creatures share the same spirit, the same capacity for love and recognition of kindness. The story spread throughout Kenya, inspiring new conservation efforts and changing how people viewed the relationship between humans and wildlife. Dr. Rodriguez continued to monitor the area, and over the following months, she occasionally spotted Amara's pride from a distance. Each time, the great lioness would pause in whatever she was doing and gaze in the direction of the research vehicle, as if remembering the day strangers became saviors. Kesi grew into a magnificent young lion, but locals reported that he showed less fear of vehicles than other wildlife, as if he remembered being saved by the kindness of humans. This remarkable story reminds us that compassion knows no boundaries, and sometimes the most powerful connections happen between the most unlikely allies. If this incredible tale of survival and unexpected friendship moved your heart, please subscribe to our channel and share this story with others who believe in the power of compassion to bridge any divide.